have a couple of thoughts I'd like to get your reaction to. With respect to, we're having a debate in Texas right now about ratios, which I take it are one of the structural things that you say don't have an effect on outcomes. Clearly, there's got to be a continuum there, right? 100-to-1 ratio's got to be bad. It'd be Lord of the Flies, right? 1-to-1, the kid would be bored because he's not interacting with other kids. Somewhere between 100-to-1 and 1-to-1, there's a range within which you're saying there's no measurable effect within that range. I'd be curious to know what that range is in your mind, because we're, as I understand it, we're kind of an outlier relative to other states in terms of we may be outside the range. I just don't know. Second thought on this is, you know, I've been a participant in the debate over teacher quality as the driver of outcomes in K through 12 too, and the challenge that policy domain presents, especially when you say credentials aren't the driver, behavior is the driver, is that there's no policy I can implement to address that system-wide, right? It was tough when the Gates Foundation was saying, you know, smaller schools will have better outcomes. I was like, okay, that's a button we can press at the legislature. It's an expensive button to press, but we can say all the schools will be smaller, right? That's a policy I can implement uniformly, categorically. When they said, no, it's actually teacher quality, well, I can't press a button and say all the teachers will be good teachers, right? We can try to do things about teacher quality with pay, with incentives, with, you know, with credentials. But if credentials don't even measure, if it's actually a behavior, it's hard to make policy that addresses behavior. And the last question, and I'll let y'all respond, is I have a hard time understanding how ratios don't matter if interaction is what matters, when ratio seems to facilitate interaction. So if you could speak to those issues, I'd appreciate it.
So let me take the ratio issue. I think you're absolutely right that there, you know, that particular study and actually a lot of them that look at ratio. The early literature on childcare talked about ratio quite a bit when particularly when you're looking at highly unregulated settings that range from, you know, as you say, a 1-to-1 to something that's almost like a warehouse type of setting. And in those kind of contexts, ratio does matter. But if you look much more carefully at sort of contemporary programs that are generally the kinds of things that, you know, cover about 75% of the kinds of programs that you probably have in any given state, that where the ratios are relatively stably set between, you know, on the low end, 8-to-1 for pre-K kind of kids, up to 10-to-1 or so, 11, 12-to-1 in some circumstances. You just don't see that as a very big driver for differences between interactions between teachers and kids and the outcomes that we see. You don't see that as a huge driver relative to the kinds of other things that occur. So you're absolutely right. There's a range outside of which, but the challenge becomes that range gets very conditional on the capacities of the teachers to manage that circumstance and what other assets that they may have. So that is ratio in some ways is as complicated as behavior is in some ways. Just a point about regulating behavior. So many states' quality rating and improvement systems right now are using observations of teachers as one of the metrics that you get a star on. So you move up, I'll just use our system as an example. It goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. As you move up that, somebody comes and observes your classroom and your setting, makes an observation of the teacher under those circumstances, and that goes into a multiple indicator metric for the quality of your classroom environment, and counts, if you will, toward the stars or the number of stars that get posted on your wall for the quality indicators. We're seeing this increasingly in K-12. So, you know, we're participants in a big study that Gates is funding to look at metrics for teacher performance, and again, thinking about a blended system in which you look at children's learning, you look at teachers' performance in the classroom in terms of how they're delivering instruction through an observational type framework and other indicators. So I think this is actually where the accountability system is actually moving right now.
We've got about 2 minutes.
Let me take part of it to add to that answer. The presumption that legislatively you can't focus on behavior seems to me one that you might want to rethink. I fly a lot, and when I get on the airplane, I do not say, "Oh my gosh, I hope the pilot is in the top quartile of his or her profession, so I can get where I want to go." In fact, the training system has managed to figure out what the behaviors are that pilots are supposed to acquire, and it makes pretty sure that they've got it before they fly the plane. We need to get to a position in education, both pre-K and K through 12, where we've learned enough about what constitutes good teaching that we can be pretty sure that teachers have it. And but once they have it, we won't have parents worried to death that the teacher her child's assigned to is in the top quartile, so the child has a chance of getting to the next grade. So you mentioned some of the things that relate to that. It is about pay for performance. It is about good accountability systems that capture what teachers doing, and it is very much about learning more than we currently know about what those critical ingredients of teaching the class well are all about.
Thank you. That really takes us time. Sasha, I know you're back there. Is it a brief question?
Yes, it's actually just a brief clarification. I wonder to what extent the research could inform the care of 0 to 3-year-olds, or is this really just research around pre-kindergarten for 3 and 4-year-old age populations?
Almost everything I talked about is applicable to the birth of 3 population, and that's been confirmed in a lot of studies.
And you are?
And I am...
Sasha.
I'm sorry, thank you. Sasha Rasko, Assistant Commissioner for Child Care Licensing. And just to round out the conversation on ratios, just FYI, we have a range of 1 to 15 for 3-year-olds to 1 to 22 for 5-year-olds in Texas.
All right, thank you. Thank you, panelists, for your worthy presentations. It's a lot of information.